Equations of lines. Writing equations of lines requires several definitions and formulas. And we'll start with the slope. The slope tells us how steep our line is. The numerator of the slope tells us how many units we move up if it's positive or down if it's negative to get from one point to the next. The denominator indicates the number of units we move right if it's positive or left if it's negative to get from one point to the next. The letter commonly used to stand for slope in formulas is M. And sometimes we talk about the slope being rise over run. That's the up and down over the left and right. Or in formula form, if you have 2 points, it's y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. When given 2 points and asked to write the equation of a line through those 2 points, this chart should be followed. Start at the top and work your way down until the requested form has been reached. So you'll start off with 2 points, x1, y1, x2, y2. Then you'll go to the slope formula. Then from there, you use point slope. The y, the first y and the first x are darkened because you'll actually write a y and an x. You won't fill numbers in there. Then it depends on what's asked for where you'll go next. If you're asked to do general or standard form, that means that the x and y are on the left, everything else on the right. It has 2 picky rules. One is that there can be no fractions or decimals, and the other is that the a, the value in front of the x, must be positive. Some textbooks put everything on the left and have it equal to 0 on the right, although over the years I've found that more textbooks put the c on the right. It doesn't really matter. Then slope-intercept form is the y by itself, y equals mx plus b. So let's practice writing some equations. These instructions say write the equation of the line in point slope form and slope-intercept form. We're given the slope and we're given the point that it passes through. I always label my points, so it would be x1, y1 over the 1 and 3. And we'll follow the line equations formulas chart. We already have M. We already have the slope, so we can skip that formula and go straight to point slope. So that formula is y minus y1, which is 3, equals m, which is 4, parentheses, x minus x1, which is 1. So that's point slope form. Then it also asked us to write it in slope-intercept form, and we need to get the y by itself. So the next step would be to distribute the 4. Y minus 3 equals 4x minus 4. And then I want the y by itself, so I add 3. Y equals 4x minus 1. And that's slope-intercept form. Same instructions. We want to write an equation in point slope and slope-intercept form. Again, we already have m, so we can skip that formula and work our way down through the chart. I've labeled my point x1 and y1. So point slope form is y minus y1. It's a negative 4, so minus negative 4 would be plus 4 equals negative 3/5 times x minus x1, which is 10. So that's point slope form. Now I want to get the y by itself. So we'll distribute the 3/5. I've got a fraction. It might help you to put the 10 over 1. Y plus 4 equals negative 3/5 x, and then negative times a negative is positive. And I can reduce this fraction. 5 divides into 10 2 times. Now when I multiply the tops, I'm multiplying negative 3 times 2, which is positive 6. Sorry, it's a negative 3 times a negative 2 is 6, and the bottom would just be 1. Then I need to get the y by itself. Subtract 4. Y equals negative 3/5 x plus 2. And that is slope-intercept form. Same instructions for this next one, but we have not been given the slope, we've just been given 2 points. So starting again at the top of our chart, the very first formula is for slope. I've labeled my points first x, first y, second x, second y. So slope would be first, m equals y2, which is 1, minus y1, which is 4, over x2, which is 6, minus x1, which is 3. So again, I have minus minus, which would be plus 3. That's going to give me a negative 3 on top, a 9 on bottom. If your slope will reduce, always reduce it. It will make things easier for you. 3 and 9 both divide by 3, so negative 1/3. The next formula in the list is point slope. Y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. So there's point slope. Then I need to continue on to get to slope-intercept form, distribute. Y minus 4 equals negative 1/3 x. Negative times a positive is a negative, and 1/3 times 3 is just 1. And finally, y by itself. Y equals negative 1/3 x plus 3, slope-intercept form. Another one, and I've labeled my points, x1, y1, x2, y2, starting with the slope, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. 0 over 4 is just 0 for my slope. Now point slope, y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. On the right side, everything's just going to go away. This was point slope, by the way. Now I'm going for slope-intercept. On the right side, 0 times everything would just be 0. And I need the y by itself. So I just have a y equals negative 2. I don't have any x's left, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. Now for some graphs. The instructions say give the slope and the y-intercept and then graph. This is easy to do when the equation is already in slope-intercept form, y equals mx plus b. The number in front of the x is the slope, and the number by itself, the constant, is the y-intercept. So when you go to graph, you always start with the y-intercept, and that's on the y-axis. So I need to go down 3 on the y-axis and put my first dot. So that's the negative 3. That always goes on first. Then the slope tells me how many to count to get to my next dot. The top number's up and down, the bottom number's left and right. So 2/3, the top is positive 2, so I go up 2, and positive 3 on the bottom means right 3. So from the dot I just put on, I'm going to count up 2 and right 3, which would be right here. You could keep going up 2 and right 3 and connect, and there's my line. Same instructions. We wanted the slope and the y-intercept. The slope is negative 3/4. I don't have any numbers left for my y-intercept, so that means my y-intercept is 0. So my first point will be at 0, 0. That's the y-intercept. Then my slope, because it's negative 3, that means I go down 3 and then right 4 from the dot I just drew at 0, 0. So down 3, right 4 would be right here. And connect. And there's my line. There are two special lines that we want to look at, and vertical lines. Horizontal lines, which are straight across, like the horizon, have a slope of m equals 0. You can walk on flat ground with no uphill or downhill. Your slope is 0. So horizontal lines have a slope of 0. The equation of a horizontal line is just y equals some number. There will be no x at all. Vertical lines, which are up and down, have a slope that is undefined. I like to think about how you can't walk straight up a wall, so the slope is undefined. And there is no y-intercept at all. The equation of a vertical line will be x equals some number. There won't be a y at all. So we want to name the slope, and we want to name the y-intercept, and then we want to graph this. X equals -2. So if it's just x equals, that's a vertical line. So the slope is undefined. And there is no y-intercept. Now to graph it, we go to where x is -2, which is right here. And at -2, we put our straight up and down vertical line. So every single point on that line has an x value of -2. Then the other situation is a y without an x, y equals 4. If it's just a y, then it's a horizontal line. And the slope of a horizontal line is 0, and the y-intercept is just going to be 4. So I count up to where y is 4, right here, and I put a horizontal line where y is 4. So everywhere on that line, every point, the y value is 4.